Welcome to Kingdom of the Logos, a Christian program of critical thinking and adventure. I'm J. Dylan Proctor, and back with me today in Chord Purgatory is Anthony, and it's great to have Anthony back. And I thought Anthony would have more to say about that. Yes, it really is wonderful to have Anthony back. I know not everyone sees everything that goes on behind the scenes, but he does a lot of work. He's great. That being said, today I want us to talk about an incident where a university's ad was flagged on Facebook. And it was a Christian university who had a theological program. They were putting out an ad for that, trying to get people interested in that. And it was flagged as being shocking, sensational, or excessively violent content. This is what Facebook said to the particular university, which was Franciscan University of Steubenville, located in Ohio. And they rejected their ad for their theological program. And it is worth noting that that's basically what it was. It was an ad for a theological program. It had a picture of Jesus on the cross within it. It was a 12th century depiction of Christ on the cross. It was a rude cross to be particular, and that's rude spelled R-O-O-D, not R-U-D-E. But anyways, this particular image, not really one of the more graphic depictions of Christ on the cross. We actually have a copy of this in the tweet that the university had put out in response to this.
Yeah, and I will say, to add to that, this is probably as far as violent things or sensual things on Facebook, this is the least of both that I can think of.
Yeah, but I do like how the university responded to this. They basically were like, yeah, the cross is shocking, sensational, or excessively violent. That's sort of the whole thing with it. And this really takes us to a broader conversation about how our culture relates with Christianity. The world is really shifting a lot, and most of the secular world in Silicon Valley, places like Facebook, Twitter, a lot of these places are very secular, and there's the looming question on how hostile are these people towards Christianity. I know for a lot of people in the church, they've been debating, how hostile are they? Was this done on purpose? Why exactly was it that they rejected this ad? Now, it is worth noting that Facebook actually come back to the table a few days later. There were a couple of different sites that put out articles about this. The Daily Mail was one of them, and the Daily Wire both put out an article about this. And Facebook came back and said, we're sorry, it was a mistake. But we're sort of at this weird place where, was it a mistake? Why was it that this ad was rejected? I know, Anthony, you had some thoughts about this as well.
Well, there's a couple things that I think are interesting about this. One is that, all right, so this is an ad, right? And obviously it made it to the advertising stage, I guess, whenever it's actually exposed to people. So at that point, this university has paid money for this to be out, right?
They're submitting it. Sort of like,
okay.
Yeah, they've submitted the money for the ad, but it was rejected. So Facebook didn't actually, I think, take the money initially, but they did reject it as an ad. Okay,
because some social media places have been accused of accepting money for advertising and then rejecting the advertisement afterwards. But in any case, I will say that it is a sad thing that we can accept the apology, but then it's like, was that a mistake? I think it's interesting that they worded that like that too.
The fact that it's unclear, and there is evidence to suggest that a lot of these places are hostile to Christians. And again, I don't like it when people like to play the victim card. We live in this world where people like to diminish personal responsibility. They want to blame everything on external sources. It is possible this is a mistake. Personally, I really don't buy it, but either way, it takes us to the place of how do we bring cohesion back to our culture. We have a really interesting situation in our culture because our culture has a hard time dealing with good and evil. They have a hard time figuring out proper morality, and they want to push things like Christian morality away. But then when bad things happen, they a lot of times like to pick and choose, and you see politicians, they take the Lord's name in vain. They call upon the name of God and Christian virtues when it's important or when it's conducive to them. However, in areas where they feel like it's unimportant or they feel like they don't like the Christian virtues, then they want to push them away and vilify them. We, in our culture, we have this new sort of off-brand version of bad and evil known as hate, which is loosely defined and very incoherent. The term hate itself is very subjective, and it can be modified and molded to serve whatever need the wielders of the word want at that given moment. But we're in this place where people really can't tell good and evil, and they can't tell if something is violent or if it's just ideas they don't like. And we've really seen Facebook do a lot, and a lot of the online companies, and again, right now we're preparing a video to go on Facebook. We see a lot of these companies which feel that they have some more moral obligation to censor certain things. If they find certain ideas are hateful or inappropriate or not lined up with their metric of social justice, they feel completely compelled to censor them. Anthony.
I think one thing that's interesting about this discussion about our culture moving away from things that are objectively evil to things that are centered around hate. Hate is bad. Objective evils aren't really a thing anymore. It's about, whatever is hateful. That's the bad thing.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that is, like, there's a general trend to moving towards how someone or someone else feels about things. Like, what's good is based on how that person feels. And I think it's interesting to see that it's taking a similar digression in what is bad. So bad is not really based on, like, objectively bad things. It's just going to be based on how people feel about those things, which is why I think hate was a really, really good description in that, because a lot of times people are upset about hate, and, hate's not really definable.
No,
it's more
not.
based on how people feel about
and
something.
And the
which is
problem you
interesting
get
to me.
with hate and this idea of it's how people feel is you're separating causes and effects. You're basically saying we have an effect. I feel bad. You did something that I don't like. Therefore, I can ascribe whatever cause I want to that. It has no consideration of the person's actual motive. And we see this with the language of hate. They call people hateful who may have zero hateful intention inside them. Now, there of course, are people who are hateful. And a lot of times we see people who are hateful, the ones who are claiming victimhood. We see this really bizarre flipping of reality into this narrative-based, conceptualized world where it's not centered around facts. It's not centered around anything that's objective. It's all about, how do I feel? Do I feel that you've done something? And it's really terrible.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just weird. Like, I've noticed before that what is good has started to become based on, how you feel about it, how I feel about it, how whoever this person is feels about it. That's their good. But now it's so interesting to see that, like, what is bad is now starting to be based on not just how you feel about it or, like, how the most people feel about it, but just, like, how anyone feels about it. That's what defines what's bad, and I think that's interesting.
It's moldable. I think we can come in agreement that says what is good and bad has got to a place where it's not connected to truth. It's not connected to objective reality. It's moldable. It's whatever people want to push their agenda. And a lot of this has to do with escaping checks and balances. They don't want anybody to be able to debate them. They want to be able to do whatever they want without any consequences. So we're in this new world, and especially as we come to this place where Facebook, they rejected this ad, though they did later change that. Who knows? Maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have, without a lot of people writing articles and talking about this like we are now. But we as Christians, we really have to push back against this. We need to be people who are proponents of truth and saying, look, we need to be people who have inquisitive minds. God calls us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Don't just conform to the world. Go out, be investigative. Again, rationality, reason, these are divine gifts. Wisdom itself is a divine gift. If God is one who uses his will to bring things into creation, and God is logical. Again, Christ is even defined as being the Logos. If there is logic inherent in the nature of God, we are created in God's image. We ourselves should be logical people. We shouldn't just want to create tools to shut things down. Again, always very skeptical of people who are all obsessed about what story someone has or what narrative they have. All these are people who want to move away from reality. They want to move to fantasy land, and that's a bad, bad thing.
Well, I think, to support your argument, definitionally, if you prefer a story or a narrative to reality, that's exactly what you're doing. You're pursuing a fantasy. So I think, there's someone who might think that those are negative connotations. They may sound negative, but definitionally, that's exactly what's actually taking place.
Yeah, it really is. That's definitely what it is. And I would like to say this, and I just want to be clear: the kingdom of God is a reality, not just a narrative. We may all have our own narratives in life. We may have our own theologies that are pulled from the reality that is the kingdom of God. But the kingdom of God, Christ's holy church, first and foremost, is a reality. It is not first and foremost a narrative. It is a reality, and the narratives are secondary to that reality. Well, another thought that I have, and we're going to wrap up our conversation on this ad with this thought. There's this new emerging narrative that Christians are privileged. They have Christian privileges, and this is just absurd. The entire privilege mentality is centered around destroying personal responsibility and personal agency. And again, I think that's ridiculous. However, I bring that up because I want to throw this out there to you. I know there are a lot of you out there, and I'm happy to see we've getting new people who are members of the Church of the Nazarene who are watching our content. Send us some feedback. Send us comments or questions on your thought on the idea of Christians have privilege in the world. Do you feel as you're a Christian you have privilege in the world? Or do you feel like you're someone who, if you try to put a ad online that has Christian content, you're more likely to be rejected because of that? Because it looks like the evidence as it comes in is not that Christians have privilege, but in fact Christians have quite the opposite. I don't know. Send me your thoughts. Are Christians privileged, yes or no? And we'll go from there. Or just give me your general thoughts on our culture. We'll have a conversation. I really like seeing those people in our local area around here, whether it be in Springfield, Ashland City. Those of you who watch, we appreciate that. It's wonderful that we can have these conversations. And on that, we'll wrap it up. Have a blessed day.